Hi, I'm intuitive healer and ascension coach Matthew John, and in this video I'm going to answer a question from a follower. Bonnie asks, when is it a promise from God and when is it a big fat wish in your heart? Great question, Bonnie. When is it a promise from God and when is it a big fat wish in your heart? Well, a promise from God would be something that happens, because anything that happens ultimately is God's will, is the will of the universe. Nothing happens without the approval, without the permission of the divine. Nothing can happen that would defy universal law. So a promise from God would be something that happens. If it doesn't happen, then it wasn't a promise from God. That's how I would answer that. And if it does happen, it was meant to be because it happened. It's simpler than it seems, isn't it? Anything that happens is meant to happen. Something that doesn't happen was not meant to happen. Why? It didn't happen. And nothing that is meant to happen will happen, and nothing that is meant to not happen will happen. I think I got that right. When is it a big fat wish in my heart? Well, Bonnie and everyone, a big fat wish in your heart. Sounds to me like desire would be another word for a big fat wish in your heart. So it's anything you want is a desire, right? Now, why do some of our desires come to be and some don't? Why, for maybe most of us, does it seem like most of our desires remain unfulfilled while maybe a few of our desires actually are fulfilled? Is it because of us? Is it because we suck? Is it because we're shit? No. Is it because God is against us? God doesn't want us to be happy? No. Could it be maybe that some of our desires don't get fulfilled because maybe it's not in our best interests for these desires to be fulfilled? Because think for a second, if every single person on the planet had every one of their desires fulfilled, we'd have a bit of a problem, wouldn't we? There's a lot of desires, I think, that people have, that other people have, that a lot of other people have, that if everyone got them at once, we'd have a problem. Something weird would happen, right? So on our individual journeys, the things that we want that manifest are the things that are meant to manifest when they're meant to manifest. A lot of times we have a desire for something. We want something in our life. This is one of the more common desires, is we want a partner, let's say. We want a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or a wife. It's a natural desire to want to merge with our opposites, or the us and the other sex, or if you're a same-sex couple, and the same sex, right? Why does it happen for some people now and for some people not, if the same two people want it? Well, it happens for the one person now because it's meant to happen for them, and it happens to the other person later because later is a better time for them on their individual journey for that to happen. Because you see, we're all divine. We're all a piece of divinity. We are all the all of divinity as well, but we're also a piece of divinity, not separate, but we believe ourselves to be separate because of the image we see in the mirror. We believe ourselves to be separate, right? And as this entity, this separate entity or separate identity, we have certain desires. But like children, they want everything, right? Think about a child going through the candy aisle at the supermarket, right? Candy's a very alluring thing for a child, right? It's colorful. I mean, these candy companies are pretty smart, you know? Everything's colorful and shiny, and it's very attractive to children. It smells good, and oh my God, does it taste good, right? It tastes great. Which is exactly why these companies make the candy the way they are, right? Anyways. So a child might be walking through the candy aisle with mom or dad, and the child wants everything. I want that. 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 I want it all. But the parent knows better what's in the best interest of the child. The parent knows that if the child eats all of the candy, he's going to have a stomach ache, he's going to be hyperactive, he's going to have diarrhea maybe, he's going to not sleep at night and keep the parents up all night, his teeth are going to start rotting, you know, if it's a smart parent. So the parent might say, no, you can't have everything, you can have one, pick one. Which is somewhat of a reasonable thing. Personally, if I was a parent, I wouldn't really let my child have any processed sugar, but as a balanced thing, let's say the parent lets a child have one piece of candy, and then maybe the parent tells the child, all right, tomorrow you can have another piece of candy when we come back to the market, right? So I see this as a metaphor for us. We're spiritual children. We're all masters. We're spiritual masters who have stepped back in time to experience ourselves as spiritual children. So as spiritual children, we don't really know what's best for us. We often think we know what's best for us, but we really don't know. And when we assume that we know what is best for us, that's often when we run into problems. It's often when we run into unexpected inconveniences, unexpected events, unexpected illnesses, breakups, pains, loss of employment, things like that, moving to a new place unexpectedly, right? Things that we don't expect. That tends to happen when we think we know more than we know. It's a very alluring trap for the ego to think the ego knows where it's going, because none of us have any clue actually where we're going, which kind of makes this game called life fun in a way, right? If we knew exactly where we were going in every moment, then what's the point of playing the game out? The game's more interesting when we don't really know where we're going and we don't know what's going to happen, right? So the ego, the smaller self, the part of us that believes that it's separate, that it's a separate person, a separate identity, a separate thing, a separate piece from the whole, the part that we look in the mirror and say, oh, this is me. I'm whatever my name is. I'm Matthew, all right? This part has desires. And some of the desires come from different parts of the brain. We have desires that come from the older part of the brain from a physical evolutionary standpoint, from the amygdala, which is the reptilian brain. And these are desires for food, because we need food, for shelter, for safety, and for sex, to reproduce, because we know, not intuitively, but inherently, I would say, instinctively is a better word, that we need to have sex to reproduce. So that's why sex is such an alluring thing. But sex, for any balanced person, takes some discernment, of course. If you're the kid at the candy store and you want to have sex with every single person you see that you're attracted to, you're probably going to create some problems with that, some issues. And that's a whole nother topic that I actually like to talk about, and I'll make a video about, is cords, energetic cords, right, which often form in sexual relationships. So, desire. We all have wishes, we all have desires. It's okay to have desires. But the best way to really manifest a desire is to desire it and to let it go. To desire it, but also to be willing to wait, to be willing to give the power, to put the onus on the universe to manifest this for us, manifest this desire for us when the time is right. Now, this doesn't mean not to act, okay? Because there's a distinction here. You might listen to what I'm saying and think, oh, if it's not going to happen until it's meant to happen, then why even try? Well, because if you didn't try, then it definitely isn't going to happen, is it? But maybe, let's say, I'm going to give an example from sports. I like sports a lot. I like hockey, okay? A guy is working his butt off. Maybe he's playing in the minor leagues or in juniors, right? And he really wants to make the NHL. It's always been his dream. He's 20 years old. His whole life, ever since he's 5 years old, he wants to make the NHL, the top level of hockey in the world, right? So he's practicing and he's playing for these minor league teams, and he's just not getting the opportunity yet, and he's frustrated. He desires to make the NHL. He desires to be on television, to play for the Stanley Cup, to be in front of 20,000 fans, to have the $1 million contract, to have the cars, to have the women, right? He desires all that. That's okay. So that's fun stuff, right? But it just doesn't happen. So he spends, let's say, 6-8 years playing in the minor leagues, toiling away, riding on the buses from New York to Virginia, right? Eating gas station food. And then finally one day, unexpectedly, there's an injury up in the major league club, and he gets that call up. And finally his wish came true, right? Now, if he didn't continue to try, if he didn't continue to act on his desire, he never ever would make the NHL, would he? If he just quit hockey because he was frustrated that he wasn't getting called up, then he never would have been called up. Right? So he continued working, but he allowed the universe to decide when the time was right. Okay? So that's the distinction there. We try and we go for what we want. But we keep an open mind and an open heart for things to happen on the universe's time and not on our time, because it's really, we face the most struggle, we face the most adversity when we're trying to make it happen all on our own, when the little self is trying to do everything and it feels like it's fighting the universe. That builds tension in the body, that manifests as illness. And it feels like we don't have the support of the universe. It feels like we're trying to push and push and push, and it's just not happening. It's because we need to learn to balance. If that's what your life feels like, or if that's what one aspect of your life feels like, maybe it's work, maybe it's relationships, maybe it's health, right? If one aspect of your life feels like you're just always pushing, and you're struggling and you're striving and you're not getting anywhere, or you're going backwards, right? This is because we're trying to take it all on our shoulders. We're trying to do it all ourselves with the little ego. And the little ego can never get everything done on its own because it wasn't meant to. It's not strong enough. Because when the ego faces off against the will of the universe always wins. Always. So to recap, if it's God's wish, it'll happen. If it's not God's wish, it will not happen, no matter how hard you try. Sometimes, if we're trying something so many times, and I'm not saying not to try, and I'm not saying not to push through, because there's a difference between just pushing and not getting anywhere, and pushing through eventually. And that can usually, when that push through comes, it usually actually comes from a state of relaxation. It actually comes from a resignment, usually. A resignment that, you know what? Maybe I can't do this all on myself. If it's God's will, it'll happen. If it's not God's will, I'll find something else that's more aligned, that feels better, that's easier, maybe, right? That feels like it's more in line with who I am. So that pushing to manifest things, to create, to get our desires, Are we trying to get our desires, or are we desiring things and allowing them to come to us? And can we be okay with not getting what we want? Or can we be okay with, we might get what we want and we might get everything that we want, but we might not get it now. We might get it later. And can we be okay with that our desires being as fluid as they are, okay? Just think back to some of the things that you desired as a child, right? And think about how many of those things do you still desire, and how many of those things just kind of fell away. Those desires, at least, right? When I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional hockey player. I actually wanted to be a fighter. Why? I don't know. I thought fighting in hockey was cool, probably because I was bullied at school a little bit, and I thought I wanted to be tough, right? It's not really in my nature, Now I see that. Now it would never work for me. At one point I wanted to be a comedian. And I can be kind of funny, but I see now it wasn't in my best interest. You know, there was a different calling for me, a calling to do this kind of work. So that, if you can see what I'm getting at, you might desire something at age 13, right? You might get to age 20 and that thing never manifested, and then you might realize, now I don't even want that anymore. And then you can kind of see, oh, all right, I kind of get it now. It wasn't really in my best interest anyways. Because the universe always knows better. All right, well, that's my video. Check out my website, MatthewJohnHealing.com. I do private sessions over Skype and over telephone. And thank you.